We are starting an in-depth exploration into a company that has, well, it's not just changed the travel industry, it's fundamentally redefined our concepts of property, urban planning, and digital regulation.
We're talking about Airbnb Inc.
Exactly. And we've synthesized a really robust stack of sources for you today, detailing its explosive financial journey, its unconventional origins, and the persistent and complex controversies it faces globally.
Our analysis today aims to track that entire arc for you, from its beginnings as really a quick cash scheme to its current status as a multi-billion-dollar force.
And we're going to focus specifically on the intense friction that emerges when that massive global scale collides with local governance, with ethical responsibility, and even geopolitical issues.
Right. The overriding theme we see in the sources again and again is this tension between achieving immense scale and maintaining genuine accountability.
So let's unpack this with the core definition first. Airbnb, Inc. is an American technology company. It operates an online marketplace.
And that marketplace deals in short and long-term homestays, various experiences, and, services all over the world.
But it is crucial to understand that Airbnb's primary function is as a broker. It's a middleman.
That's the key. It does not own the properties. It simply facilitates the booking, and for that, it charges a commission on every single transaction.
And that simple distinction being a platform rather than a direct owner of real estate, that's the intellectual and legal foundation for almost every regulatory conflict we're going to examine.
Absolutely. By avoiding asset ownership, they attempt to sidestep the traditional liabilities, the responsibilities, and the tax burdens that, conventional hotels and property owners have to shoulder.
And to think this whole massive enterprise started because three guys just needed to pay their rent.
It's an incredible story. The genesis of what was originally called Air Bed and Breakfast goes all the way back to San Francisco in October of 2007.
The roommates, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, they were struggling to cover the rent for their loft.
So they decided to put 3 air mattresses in their living room. And they offered them, along with breakfast, to attendees of a local conference.
That initial necessity, though, it quickly solidified into a real business concept.
Right. In February 2008, Nathan Blacharsik, who was a technical expert and a former roommate of Chesky's, he joined the effort as the chief technology officer.
And that formalized the founding trio. They officially launched the platform, airbedanbreakfast.com, on August 11, 2008.
What's so remarkable about that timing is the specific market need they immediately addressed.
Their first customers arrived in the summer of 2008, and it was during the Industrial Design Conference hosted by the Industrial Designers Society of America.
And the hotels in San Francisco were completely saturated, totally booked.
So travelers were desperate for lodging, and these temporary airbeds, they provided a timely, critical solution. It wasn't a luxury product at all.
No, it was an emergency solution.
And the initial funding method, well, it's one of the most legendary stories in startup history.
It really is. Instead of relying solely on traditional venture capital, the founders generated their first significant capital by leaning into pure hustle.
They raised $30,000 by designing, boxing, and then selling limited edition cereal boxes.
And these weren't just any cereal boxes. They were named after the 2008 U.S. presidential candidates.
Obama O's and Cap McCain.
Exactly. They leveraged the whole fervor of the election, and they primarily sold these boxes at the Democratic National Convention.
That unconventional approach really proved they had resourcefulness and, a deep understanding of marketing.
And it was that ingenuity that caught the attention of programmer Paul Graham. He invited them to join the prestigious Y Combinator startup incubator in January 2009.
Y Combinator then provided $20,000 in early funding and intensive training.
And in exchange, they took a 6% interest in the burgeoning company.
That initial injection of capital allowed the team to refine the service. They actually traveled to New York City to meet their users face-to-face and to promote the site.
That hands-on approach really proved the model had legs.
For sure. By March 2009, so just months after the Y Combinator investment, the source material notes they had already amassed 10,000 users and 2,500 listings.
That level of rapid early traction demonstrated the global potential of the peer-to-peer lodging concept. It was clear something big was happening.
So following that successful early stage, the company had to evolve its brand to reflect its actual scale.
And the first major shift happened in March 2009. That's when they shortened the name to Airbnb.com.
This might seem like a small detail, but you have to see it as a crucial strategic choice.
Right. They needed to eliminate the literal confusion around air mattresses.
The platform had already scaled way beyond sleeping on the floor. I mean, they were listing entire apartments and spare rooms.
The name needed to signify hospitality options in general, not just, emergency camping gear.
And that shift coincided with this rapidly growing public recognition. By March 2011, they secured a major industry nod.
They won the coveted App Award at the South by Southwest Conference, SXWA.
And with that, they had really cemented their place in the tech landscape.
From that point on, we see a really clear pattern of calculated diversification. They were aiming to make the platform sticky and appeal to lucrative new market segments beyond just the leisure traveler.
First, they targeted business travel.
Right. In July 2014, they established a significant partnership with Concur, a major expense reporting service.
And this was an attempt to make it easier for corporate travelers to book and expense stays on the platform, really legitimizing it for professional use.
Then in November 2016, they moved beyond just accommodation entirely.
That's when they introduced experiences.
Exactly. This allowed users to book activities, tours, classes, all alongside their lodging. It transformed the platform from just a place to sleep into a full-service travel ecosystem.
They wanted to capture the entire vacation budget, not just part of it.
And that ambition extended to quality control and the luxury market. So in February 2018, they announced Airbnb Plus,
Which was a collection of homes that had been professionally vetted for superior service, comfort, and, design standards.
This was a direct response to those recurring complaints about inconsistent quality and really a direct challenge to high-end boutique hotels,
And almost immediately after that, they launched Beyond by Airbnb.
which focused specifically on the ultra-luxury segment. You're talking multi-million-dollar vacation rentals.
So they were successfully segmenting their audience, offering options from the original spare air mattress all the way up to villas that could rival the world's most exclusive hotels.
The corporate market push also continued very aggressively. In August 2019, they acquired Urbandoor.
That was an online marketplace specializing in extended stays, really tailored for corporate clients.
And that acquisition strengthened their capacity to handle long-term, predictable corporate bookings, which added a lot of stability to their revenue model.
And all this strategic growth led to an almost unimaginable level of scale.
The numbers are staggering. By October 2019, the platform was hosting 2 million people staying with Airbnb each night.
2 million a night. It had achieved the size of several major international hotel chains combined, and this was right before the global pandemic hit.
That scale is the crucial backdrop for the financial roller coaster that followed, especially in the lead-up to the IPO. It really illustrates just how high the stakes were when COVID-19 delivered its shock.
Let's review the pre-IPO funding because it just charts their stratospheric rise. In April 2014, TPG Capital, a major private equity firm, invested $450 million.
And that instantly valued the company at $10 billion.
Then 3 years later, in March 2017, they raised another $1 billion in funding.
It vaulted their valuation up to $31 billion. This rapid triple-digit increase just showed immense market confidence.
But when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived in early 2020, all that confidence just evaporated overnight.
The source material indicates an immediate, catastrophic shock. Bookings dropped by as much as 96% in some major cities.
The company had to move fast. They pledged $250 million in payouts to hosts just to compensate them for pandemic-related guest cancellations.
That level of financial commitment led immediately to deep restructuring. They had to lay off approximately 1,900 employees globally.
Which represented about 25% of their entire workforce across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. I mean, this was a brutal contraction after years of just explosive growth.
The financing they scrambled to secure further illustrates the severity of the crisis, the desperate need for liquidity.
In April 2020, they managed to acquire $1 billion in shares, but this came at a drastically reduced valuation.
Only $18 billion. That was a massive drop from the $31 billion peak just 3 years prior.
The truly eye-opening detail, though, is the associated debt.
Right. They also took on $1 billion in debt, and the interest rates for this debt were punishingly high, ranging between 9% and 11.5%.
For a major established technology company, securing financing at such a steep rate is a stark indicator of severe financial distress.
It showed there was a perceived high risk by lenders during that moment. They were essentially paying premium prices for survival capital.
What is fascinating, though, and perhaps what saved their IPO plans, is the counter trend that the sources highlight during this period.
Right. While bookings in dense urban centers plummeted, demand surprisingly rose in many rural and remote areas.
People still needed to travel or relocate, but they were seeking isolated destinations rather than crowded cities.
It suggested that the platform's core utility was still intact, it had just shifted geographically.
And this resilience really provided the foundation for their decision to go public. Despite all the ongoing turmoil, on December 10th, 2020, Airbnb launched its initial public offering on NASDAQ.
Under the ticker ABNB.
The IPO was a monumental success. It raised $3.5 billion and resulted in an initial valuation that just soared up to $100 billion.
The market clearly believed in the platform's post-pandemic recovery potential.
And we should also note the symbolic gesture they included. Shares valued at $238 million were offered specifically to hosts on the platform at $68 per share.
Integrating their critical supplier base into the company's financial success, it was a smart move.
Looking at their current financial health, the company hasn't just recovered, it has thrived. The 2024 financial figures reported in the sources are really impressive.
$11.1 billion in revenue, with strong profitability, shown by $2.55 billion in operating income and $2.65 billion in net income.
They report total assets of $20.9 billion, and that's supported by 7,300 employees.
That financial profile firmly establishes them as a global force, far removed from the scrappy startup phase.
And that level of scale and profitability means they are now viewed and often regulated as an infrastructural component of the global lodging and housing ecosystem.
Which naturally increases the scrutiny they face.
A lot. A large part of building that scale was an aggressive, very strategic acquisition strategy. It was designed to eliminate competitors and broaden their utility offerings.
The acquisitions often focused on two objectives. First, eliminating foreign competition to establish geographic dominance. And second, adding travel utility to make the platform indispensable.
So for international expansion, in 2011, they acquired Accolio, a German competitor.
Which directly led to the establishment of their first international office in Hamburg.
And the following year, 2012, they purchased CrashPatter,
their largest UK competitor at the time, that instantly added 6,000 international listings to their inventory.
But they also focused on enhancing the customer's experience beyond just the bed itself.
Right. In 2012, they purchased Nabewise, an online city guide that provided hyper-local recommendations.
So the platform was the source not just for lodging, but for local intelligence.
And they followed this by buying LocalMind that same year, which was a location-based question-and-answer platform, allowing guests to tap local knowledge instantly.
As they matured, their acquisitions began targeting more specialized, higher revenue niches.
The purchase of Luxury Retreats International in 2017 for $300 million was clearly aimed at quickly capturing market share in the high-end villa rental space.
A direct competition with established luxury travel agencies.
Then, in 2019, they acquired Geist, a platform for booking venues for meetings and corporate events,
broadening their reach into commercial real estate usage.
And perhaps most telling of their diversification strategy, they bought Hotel Tonight, also in 2019, for $400 million.
Specifically to target last-minute hotel bookings. So they were moving away from pure homestays and incorporating traditional lodging right into their platform.
And looking toward the future, their acquisition of GamePlanner.ai, an artificial intelligence startup, in November 2023, clearly signals their investment strategy is focused on integrating AI.
To streamline service, pricing, and potentially personalization.
The global scale of these operations required a massive international footprint. Their first international office was established in London in October 2011.
And that was followed by rapid expansion in 2012 into key markets like Paris, Milan, Barcelona, Moscow, and São Paulo.
Dublin was later designated as their European headquarters in 2013.
But operating across so many jurisdictions means navigating complex international politics.
And this became acutely apparent in 2022 when they had to navigate some major geopolitical crises.
Right. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and adhering to international sanctions, Airbnb announced the suspension of all business operations within Russia and Belarus.
An even more complex withdrawal occurred in May 2022 when Airbnb ceased its domestic operations in China.
And the source material highlights this wasn't purely an economic decision based on China's restrictive zero-COVID policy.
No, the sources reveal a critical regulatory hurdle. There were complicated, expensive regulations imposed by the Chinese government that required the company to submit detailed guest information.
Passport data, stay itineraries.
Everything, right to the government for tracking purposes.
And this posed a fundamental conflict with the company's stated policies on user privacy and data security.
We see evidence of this privacy friction even before the withdrawal. A high-profile Airbnb executive, a former FBI deputy director who joined the company in 2019, he resigned after only 6 months.
Reportedly, it was over the company's policies regarding Chinese data sharing requirements.
This points to a deep internal conflict over the ethics and the feasibility of operating under such intense surveillance mandates.
And the demand for highly sensitive user data from governments brings us directly to the most critical area of friction globally.
The company's impact on local communities and housing regulation.
This phenomenon has become universally known as the Airbnb effect.
And it's the core social and economic criticism leveled against the platform across countless jurisdictions. It's what led to the regulatory patchwork we see today.
So for you listening, we need to dedicate some time to breaking down what this effect actually means, beyond just the simple definition.
The core finding from multiple economic studies is that short-term rentals contribute directly and significantly to rising long-term rental prices and overall house prices in the neighborhoods where they operate.
The mechanism is, it's straightforward, but it's devastating to housing supply.
Right. Property owners, they realize they can generate substantially more income via short-term rentals, so they begin pulling properties off the stable long-term rental market.
They convert them into de facto hotels.
And this reduction in available long-term supply artificially creates scarcity, which in turn drives up costs for local residents who need stable, affordable housing.
And this isn't just theory. It has severe social consequences.
The source material highlights ethical and legal concerns, including accusations that landlords have illegally evicted existing long-term tenants simply to convert their properties into lucrative Airbnb listings,
which results in neighborhood displacement and the erosion of community character.
Because of this profound impact on housing affordability and availability, cities around the world have responded with increased lodging regulations, taxes, and restrictions.
And Airbnb, leveraging its massive financial resources, has generally opposed these regulations via extensive lobbying efforts.
This clash is intensified by the powerful traditional lodging sector.
Of course. The hotel industry actively lobbies for stricter regulations, often arguing that short-term rentals enjoy an unfair advantage.
They demand that Airbnb hosts should be required to obtain the same business licenses, pay the same hotel and occupancy taxes, and comply with the same zoning and safety standards that traditional hotels must meet.
The result of all this complex political and economic pressure is an almost overwhelming patchwork of global rules.
For a host operating in multiple cities, or for you as a traveler moving across borders, understanding the legality of a single booking can be incredibly difficult because of this massive variation.
Let's start with Europe, which has implemented some of the most prescriptive regulatory schemes aimed squarely at housing preservation and tax compliance.
Many major cities use strict time limits, known as hard caps, to prevent apartments from functioning as full-time hotels.
So consider the specifics. London, Lucerne, and Amsterdam all limit short-term rentals to a maximum of 90 days per calendar year.
And Amsterdam went even further. They implemented outright bans on rentals in specific, highly concentrated tourist areas to protect residential density.
Paris, another crucial tourist destination, enforces a 120-day annual cap.
And they mandate that every host must register their listing with the town hall for tracking purposes.
Taxation is another major strategy. Rome, for instance, requires short-term rental platforms to withhold a substantial 21% rental income tax directly from the host,
which ensures tax compliance.
Yeah.
And Venice, which is famous for its over-tourism issues, requires hosts to collect and remit specific tourist taxes.
But the challenge of enforcement is really highlighted by the situation in Ireland.
Right. While a 90-day cap exists for primary residences, one study found that compliance with the required registration and planning permission laws was alarmingly minimal.
The numbers are pretty stark. Out of 25,000 listed properties, only 38 were found to have secured the necessary planning permission.
It illustrates the difficulty regulators face in actually policing these platforms.
The regulatory methods vary wildly, even moving to complete bans based on local needs.
Palma de Mallorca, for example, was concerned about unsustainable tourism density, so they took the drastic step of banning home-sharing sites entirely.
And then you have architectural requirements. Madrid bans listings that do not have private entrances,
which is a rule designed to protect the peace and security of neighboring apartment residents.
And Vienna bans short-term rentals completely in specific residential zones, although it does make an important exemption.
Yes, for apartments that are clearly the host's primary residence.
Hmm.
Again, prioritizing housing for locals.
This regulatory contrast is just as sharp across North America. It presents a deeply polarized operational environment for the company.
You see strict housing preservation tactics right alongside regions where regulation is essentially prohibited.
So in Canada, cities like Toronto and Vancouver have implemented severe measures to protect their extremely tight housing markets,
They require that short-term rentals must operate exclusively within the host's primary residence.
which prevents the removal of full-time rental units from the market. Hosts also must obtain licenses.
This is all aimed at protecting housing stock, first and foremost.
Across the U.S., we see diverse restrictions largely focused on limiting volume.
Jersey City limits rentals to 60 days per year. Los Angeles, a massive market, requires host registration, charges an $89 fee, and limits the sharing of secondary units to 120 days in a calendar year.
Washington, D.C. also requires licenses and limits rentals where the host is not present to a combined 90 days per year.
These limits are volume controls. They're attempting to slow the conversion of residential units into commercial ones.
But the epicenter of restriction is, well, it's undeniably New York City.
The city prohibits rentals under 30 days unless the host is actually present on the property. And on top of that, the required licenses are extremely difficult to obtain.
Very few have been issued, and this has essentially crippled the short-term rental market there.
West New York, New Jersey, which is right next to the city, has simply banned short-term rentals altogether. It shows a willingness to use the severest legal tool available.
And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have states like Arizona.
In Phoenix, most local regulations are effectively disallowed because state law prohibits municipalities from interfering in what are considered fundamental property rights.
So that legislative framework creates a regulatory environment that is highly favorable to the platform and sets up a completely different relationship with its host base.
And shifting to Asia, the constraints are equally detailed and often tied to national security and data.
Japan, for instance, requires hosts to register their listings with the government, and they limit the maximum rental time to 180 days per year.
And Singapore has one of the tightest, most prohibitive restrictions globally. Short-term home rentals of less than 3 months are simply illegal.
It just shows the vast international variance in how governments categorize and control the commercial use of residential property, forcing the company to adapt to dozens of different legal realities.
The need for compliance and transparency that we see in the regulatory realm carries directly into issues of privacy, guest safety, and geopolitical friction.
These are the areas where the tension between scale and accountability becomes most acute.
The conflict over government access to user data is a continuous battle. It's between the company's claims of protecting user privacy and a government's sovereign need for regulatory enforcement.
Particularly tax collection and compliance verification.
Right. Airbnb fiercely contested a New York law that would have required it to provide detailed guest information so the city could enforce local rental regulations.
Specifically, that host presence rule.
Exactly. The company argued this was a huge overreach.
A truce was eventually reached in May 2019. Airbnb agreed to turn over some anonymized information, specifically for about 17,000 listings.
Which allowed the city to pursue illegal rentals without accessing sensitive individual guest identities.
And similar agreements were later reached in Boston and Miami, which established a kind of template for data compromise.
The European context, though, tested these data claims against the power of the European Union.
There was a legal challenge brought in Belgium, where Airbnb argued that the obligation imposed by authorities to provide detailed tax particulars was incompatible with EU law.
Specifically, the freedom to provide services.
However, the European Court of Justice ruled against Airbnb in April 2022.
The court determined that the requirement for platforms to transmit tax particulars of tourist transactions was not contrary to EU law.
So the court essentially prioritized the national government's ability to collect taxes and verify compliance over the platform's claims of data protection in this specific context.
And referred the case back to the Belgian Constitutional Court for final action.
In another significant legal setback, unrelated to data but relating to consumer protection, a March 2020 court ruling in the Netherlands found that Airbnb's practice of charging service fees to both the host and the guest was illegal.
Illegal under Dutch consumer law.
This ruling potentially granted the right of reimbursement to approximately 30,000 guests, provided they successfully file claims.
This practice, which is often common in two-sided marketplaces, was legally scrutinized, and found wanting in that jurisdiction, signaling ongoing legal vulnerability for the platform's fee structure.
Airbnb did file countersuits, seeking greater clarity on the scope of that ruling.
These legal pressures are significant, but they pale in comparison to the controversies surrounding host misconduct and basic guest safety, which directly impacts you, the user.
The sources detail serious recurring allegations against hosts. Things like tax circumvention, severe issues like last-minute cancellations leaving guests stranded, and lodging problems like mold or rodent infestations.
And then there are more sinister issues, including theft, invasion of privacy, bait-and-switch scams, and, in the most severe documented cases, incidents of sexual assault, rape, and murder.
These incidents raise really profound questions about how a platform of this scale can ensure even minimum standards of safety.
Airbnb's standard defense has been to assert that the number of these serious incidents is not statistically significant relative to the millions of bookings they process.
They also note that they ban violators and associated accounts when they're discovered.
But a July 2024 CNN report highlighted some alarming details within Airbnb's own safety disclaimers that suggest a systemic inability to guarantee host suitability.
The report explicitly noted that the company's background checks should not be relied upon to identify all past criminal convictions or red flags.
And here is where it becomes deeply concerning for the user. The company's internal policy warns users that convictions for murder, terrorism, rape, or child molestation are not automatic disqualifiers for a host on the platform.
That's not just a technical footnote, it's a critical policy issue.
It suggests that even the most severe criminal history, unless it's directly caught by their specific, limited background check mechanism, might not prevent an individual from hosting guests.
Including vulnerable travelers. This raises profound questions about where the responsibility truly lies when something goes wrong.
The most sensational and persistent safety problem detailed in the sources is the crisis of hidden cameras.
There have been multiple incidents globally where hosts have secretly recorded their guests, including in private spaces like bedrooms and bathrooms.
It's hard to imagine being in your most private space, whether you're traveling alone or with family, only to find you are being watched and recorded.
The company's internal practices regarding this issue drew intense scrutiny.
A 2023 deposition cited in the source material revealed testimony from an Airbnb employee stating that the company does not routinely notify law enforcement when a hidden camera complaint is raised.
Instead, they opted for internal inquiries.
And law enforcement experts argued that this internal inquiry approach could critically hinder criminal investigations.
By giving hosts time to delete footage, dismantle equipment, or destroy evidence, the company's internal policy potentially protected the perpetrator instead of the victim.
This internal failure ultimately forced a major policy shift. In March 2024, Airbnb announced an outright ban on all indoor cameras and properties listed on the site.
That was effective April 30th. Furthermore, the new policy requires hosts to disclose the use of any noise decibel monitoring equipment, which is often used as a substitute surveillance measure.
The July 2024 CNN investigation concluded that the company's past safety policies and strategies in this area were often designed more to prevent regulation and legally distance itself from responsibility,
rather than proactively ensuring a secure environment for guests.
And moving from domestic safety practices to the global stage, Airbnb has repeatedly found itself navigating complex geopolitical conflicts and debates over political extremism.
It's really tested its commitment to its stated non-discrimination terms.
One of the most highly charged, long-running controversies involves the approximately 200 listings located in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank.
In November 2018, Airbnb initially announced it would remove these listings. They cited the settlements being at the core of the Israeli-Palestinian dispute and noted that the policy was difficult to implement fairly.
That decision led to immediate legal challenges. Property owners in the settlements filed lawsuits in both Israel and the United States, alleging discrimination based on their place of residence.
So in April 2019, Airbnb reversed its decision.
The resulting policy was a compromise. They would retain the listings, but promise to donate any profits derived from them to nonprofit organizations dedicated to humanitarian aid globally.
This issue drew international condemnation. In February 2020, the United Nations Human Rights Council included Airbnb on a list of companies involved in activities that raise particular human rights concerns.
Specifically, the company was categorized under the provision of services and utilities supporting the maintenance and existence of settlements.
Closer to home, the company has navigated controversies concerning its interaction with political extremism in the United States.
In August 2017, Airbnb took decisive action during the white supremacist Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia.
They cited their non-discrimination terms to justify canceling numerous bookings and closing accounts belonging to known attendees.
However, they faced heavy criticism in January 2021 for initially allowing participants in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol to book units in the Washington metropolitan area.
In response to the backlash and the possibility of further civil violence, the day after the Capitol raid, Airbnb announced it was banning all bookings in the region prior to the inauguration of President Joe Biden.
These policy challenges resurfaced in 2024 with a whistleblower complaint. A former Airbnb contractor alleged that the company had weakened its policies against extremists and had dissolved its dedicated team responsible for proactively removing problematic accounts.
The source material notes that Airbnb has publicly denied these specific allegations, but the tension over enforcement remains high.
And finally, we have to look at the highly controversial decision to maintain high-profile sponsorships, despite intense human rights concerns abroad.
Airbnb was one of 15 leading global sponsors of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing.
And the company proceeded with this sponsorship despite direct requests from human rights groups in March 2021 to drop the financial support over the persecution of Uyghurs in China.
This choice resulted in further specific accusations.
Sources claim that Airbnb was actively allowing listings on land owned by the sanctioned Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps.
This is a Chinese state-owned paramilitary entity, specifically sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act for its alleged involvement in human rights abuses, including the persecution of Uyghurs.
For the average listener booking a vacation, these geopolitical tensions translate into a very real dilemma.
Are you unknowingly supporting sanctioned entities or activities when you click book on the platform? It's a serious question.
So we have thoroughly documented the full journey of this company. It started with 3 innovative founders who just needed cash.
They created a simple solution that rapidly evolved through strategic acquisitions, diversification into luxury and corporate travel,
And eventually a massive $100 billion valuation and strong profitability, evidenced by its $11.1 billion in 2024 revenue.
But that impressive financial ascent and achievement of global scale has been constantly balanced by immense and multifaceted friction.
We've seen the company struggle with a vast range of regulatory challenges, from local density and licensing issues in Europe and North America to the severe geopolitical tightropes walked in contexts like the West Bank and China.
All of which test their commitments to both profit and principle.
The source material consistently illustrates that core tension we identified at the very beginning. How does the company balance its inherent pursuit of massive, often lightly regulated scale
with the simultaneous requirement to enforce basic host compliance, ensure guest safety, and mitigate negative societal effects like the Airbnb effect on housing affordability?
And all of this complex, high-stakes maneuvering, the legal battles over data, the safety disclosures about host backgrounds, the compromises on political policy, it all rests upon a single action.
An action taken by every user, agreeing to the company's terms and conditions. And that brings us to the final, fascinating observation drawn directly from the source material. It's one that really underlines the difficulty of achieving true, informed consent on massive digital platforms.
Back in 2014, the linguist Mark Lieberman took the time to measure the sheer volume of legal text required to use the platform.
And he highlighted a seemingly simple logistical challenge facing every single user.
Lieberman calculated that the combined terms of service, privacy policy, and other relevant policies amounted to a staggering 55,081 words.
55,000 words. And these are the documents that must be agreed to before you click book or you become a host.
He noted that this length is about the size of a short novel, though much less readable.
Think about that comparison. A short novel just to agree to the rules of a service.
This means that a user, even one dedicated to due diligence, must wade through the equivalent of a substantial book containing all those disclaimers about criminal records, the data sharing protocols, and the complicated legal boundaries before they use the product.
This detail highlights a profound systemic challenge for every platform user and regulator. How informed can any of us truly be when utilizing a platform governed by legal agreements the length of a short novel?
Right. And how can regulators hold a company accountable to rules that are buried in 55,000 words of legalese?
It raises the ultimate question of whether informed consent in the age of global digital platforms is truly possible.
Or if the sheer volume of mandated legal information is intentionally deployed as a mechanism to shift liability from the platform to the individual consumer. Something for you to consider the next time you scroll past that. Agree to terms checkbox.
Thanks for listening.